The sea breeze brushed against the thick glass windows of the Venice restaurant, where golden light danced on wine glasses and the gentle hum of jazz floated through the air. It was an evening like any other, until suddenly every sound in the room seemed to slow, as if someone had turned the world's dial to mute. Victoria Reynolds, the young waitress at Venice, noticed it first. The clinking of cutlery stopped. Half-finished conversations fell into silence. Only a faint, uneven breath echoed from someone near the bar. She lifted her head, and her hazel eyes accidentally met a corner table at the far end of the room, a table that in 3 months of working, there had never been occupied. "Table 7, whispered Monica, her coworker pressing a leather-bound menu into Victoria's hands. "The man sitting there? That's Samuel Harrison." Victoria frowned slightly. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it until Monica added her voice, trembling. "He owns half of San Diego's port. They say anyone who betrays him disappears without a trace." Victoria's heart skipped not out of fear, but because of the way everyone around her seemed to shrink at the mere mention of his name. She swallowed, glancing toward the windowed booth where a man sat quietly, the dim light glinting off the gold watch on his wrist. Samuel Harrison, dark brown hair, neatly trimmed chiseled features, a tailored gray suit hugging his tall frame. But it was his eyes that held her still, deep quiet, carrying something unnameable like a man who had seen too much to believe in anything anymore. "Go on," Victoria Monica urged. "The boss wants that table served by someone who doesn't talk much. And you fit the bill." She pressed her lips together. Doesn't talk much meaning invisible. A role she knew too well after years of caring for her ailing father, learning to walk softly. Speak gently and live without drawing the world's attention. Victoria approached the table, her heart pounding with every step. 2 men sat nearby, massive, expressionless, carved from stone. Bodyguards. "Of course. Good evening, sir," she said softly but clearly. Samuel looked up. His gaze held her suspended in place, unable to retreat, unable to move forward. He didn't speak right away. He tilted his head slightly before replying in a low, velvety voice. "Brunello di Montalcino, 1989. And let the chef choose the appetizer." Victoria nodded, scribbling quickly in her notepad, though her hand trembled slightly. He noticed. His lips curved, not quite a smile, more like a motion filled with quiet intrigue. "What's your name, Victoria, sir?" "No," he said softly, shaking his head. "Tonight, let's call you Reynolds. Your last name sounds more honest." She froze for a second, wondering how this man could possibly know her surname. Before she could ask, he was already looking down at his phone, leaving her with a storm of unanswered questions. When Victoria returned with the wine, the bodyguards were gone. Samuel sat alone, turning over a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond ring so dazzling it almost hurt to look at. "Do you think she'll like it?" he asked, eyes fixed on the stone. "She," Victoria echoed. "The woman I'm going to propose to." His tone was calm, too calm. He might as well have been discussing a business deal, not love. Victoria gazed at the ring and murmured, "It's beautiful, but heavy, like something that would make you wonder whether to feel happy or afraid." For the first time, Samuel laughed, a deep, quiet sound that seemed to shake the air itself. "Honest," he said. "I like that." She smiled faintly, unaware that her honesty in just a few minutes would save his life. When she returned to the counter, Monica was speaking to a stranger, a man in a dark suit, slicked back hair, and a forced smile. "Mark Carter," Monica introduced quickly. "Helping with the night shift." Victoria's brow furrowed. She'd seen this man once before at the cafe she used to work in back in San Francisco. But why was he here? Mark approached, taking a tray of food. "I'll bring the appetizer to table 7, if that's okay," he said smoothly. A strange chill ran down Victoria's spine. Her instincts screamed that something was off. His cologne's sharp chemical foreign to the warm scent of the restaurant. His hand slid quietly into his jacket pocket. Time froze. Victoria moved quickly, bending close to Samuel's ear, whispering shakily, "Don't move. Please don't move." She slipped her hand under the table, clasping his tightly, a silent warning. Their eyes met, and Samuel understood instantly. He stayed still watching as Mark approached with the tray. When Mark lifted his right hand, Victoria acted on pure instinct. She dropped the glass of water. It shattered loudly, spilling across Samuel's expensive suit. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she cried loud enough for the entire room to turn. In a flash, the two bodyguards appeared. One grabbed Mark's wrist and twisted it sharply. Something metallic hit the floor, a glass syringe filled with cloudy liquid. The restaurant froze in collective shock. Samuel stood slowly, brushed his sleeve, and gave a curt nod to his men. Mark was dragged away. The back door slammed shut. Victoria stood motionless, her heart racing wildly. She'd never imagined a whisper could change the course of an entire night. Samuel turned toward her. His eyes were no longer indifferent. They carried something deeper, heavier, as if he'd just etched her name into his fate. "Come with me," he said quietly but firmly. I still have my shift," she stammered. "Not anymore," he replied. "From the moment you whispered in my ear, you stepped into a different world." Outside, the night wind was cold and sharp. Samuel opened the door of a black Bentley, extending his hand like a gentleman at a ballroom. Victoria hesitated. She could go back, return to being invisible. Or she could take his hand and step into the storm that was now her destiny. She inhaled deeply and placed her hand in his. Warm, strong, dangerous. The car rolled away, city lights streaking across the windows like fading memories. Behind them, the Venice restaurant came back to life, music, laughter, clinking glasses, as if no attempt on a man's life had just unfolded there. But Victoria knew her ordinary life had ended. Samuel's gaze met hers through the rearview mirror, calm as ever, but with something hidden beneath. "You saved my life," he said softly. "And now you'll need me to stay alive." Victoria turned, fear and fascination mixing in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "The man didn't act alone," Samuel replied. "And now they've seen your face." The car accelerated. Far behind them, police sirens wailed, too late, too far away. The ocean wind swept through, carrying salt and chill across the night. Somewhere deep inside, Victoria sensed it. She hadn't just saved a man. She had touched the edge of a world where love and sin wore the same face. As the headlights brushed against the silver waves, Samuel tilted his head and murmured, his voice low and dangerous. "Stay silent, Victoria. From now on, sound can kill." She pressed her lips together, gazing out the window. The city faded behind her, shrinking like a dream dissolving into dawn. If you want to know what happens when Victoria steps deeper into Samuel Harrison's world, follow the channel for the next part. Every choice comes with a price. And sometimes love is the sharpest blade of all. When Victoria opened her eyes, she was no longer in the black Bentley. A soft light filtered through white curtains, casting across a high ceiling with delicate cornices. The scent of sea salt lingered in the air, mingling with the warm aroma of sandalwood. The room felt strange, but strangely peaceful. She sat up, heart racing. The waitress dress from last night had been replaced by a thin sweater and soft trousers. On the bedside tray sat a steaming cup of coffee. On the table was a neatly folded note. "Breakfast at 9. I'll be waiting on the terrace. S.H. Samuel Harrison." The name sent a small shiver down her spine. She took a deep breath and stepped out onto the balcony. Before her stretched the open ocean waves, breaking on white sand, the salty wind threading through her hair. The villa stood alone on a rocky promontory, far removed from the city. Victoria closed her eyes. She remembered his look in the car the night before, calm, deep, yet with something underneath like a pain that had slept for too long. Samuel stood at the terrace railing, shirt sleeves rolled up, an espresso cup in hand. When she came out, he did not turn immediately. He spoke in the same, even, low voice. "This view is best at dawn, before the sun gets a chance to burn everything away." "Did you bring me here because you were afraid I'd be killed?" she asked, her voice still hoarse from the long night. He turned, his eyes dark as the night sea. "Not afraid. Certain." The answer made her freeze. He gestured to the wooden chair opposite him. On the table were croissants, fruit, and coffee. "Have something to eat," he said. "You haven't eaten since last night." "I can't eat until I understand what's happening," she replied. Samuel tilted his head and set his cup down. "Fair enough. You have the right to know." He pulled a brown envelope from his jacket pocket and placed it before her. Inside were several surveillance photographs images of her in her small apartment. One showed her hanging laundry, another captured her asleep on a sofa. Victoria went pale, her hands trembling. My God. Who they put cameras in the walls? Not new. I think at least 6 months. She clenched her hands to steady herself. Who are they? Samuel looked at her a long time, weighing how much to reveal. People who once worked for your father. The air froze. My father, her voice cracked. He's just a high school teacher. Yes, but that's only part of the story. Samuel left the table and stepped to the railing. Light sketched cold planes along his nose and cheekbones. Daniel Reynolds used to be my accountant. He helped me build a legal veneer for the Harrison Group money laundering investments moving capital. Everything passed through him until he suddenly withdrew. Victoria shook her head. No way. My father doesn't even know Excel. Samuel gave a small, not mocking smile, the smile of a man used to denial. He's smarter than you imagine, Victoria. More discreet than anyone I've ever known. She looked at him directly. So you're saying my father was a criminal? No. He paused. A flash of sadness crossed his eyes. He's a good man. But in my world, good men often die young. Those words cut the air like a cold blade. At noon, Samuel led her along the glass corridor of the villa. Everything here spoke of minimal, meticulous order. No picture out of place. No ornament superfluous. Do you live here alone? Perhaps exist is more accurate, he replied. I own many houses. None of them feel like home. They stopped before a small room. Samuel opened the door. Inside sat an old black piano polished clean. My mother's, he said softly. She died when I was 15. After that, I stopped listening to music. Victoria fell silent. She saw in him not only power and chill, but a loss she dared not touch. Aren't you afraid of being alone? She asked in a very small voice. Loneliness is something I understand well. Samuel turned to her. But you are different. There's something in your eyes that makes people forget to defend themselves. She flushed and looked away. I'm not that special. You saved my life, Victoria. In my world, nobody does that without a reason. I just followed instinct, she said. That instinct, he replied, stepping closer, is keeping me awake. The distance between them dwindled to a single breath. The smell of sea mixed with the wood scent from him made it hard for her to breathe. In his look, there was something warm and dangerous, like a flame flickering in a cold night. She stepped back, heart racing. You should keep your distance, Samuel. Maybe he murmured. But I've never been good at doing the right thing. Afternoon fell. Victoria sat alone on the stone steps facing the sea. The phone he had left rested beside her with a single contact SH. She picked it up hesitantly. Part of her wanted to return to the small, anonymous life. Yet whenever she closed her eyes, she saw his gaze the look of both promise and warning. Footsteps sounded behind her. Samuel came up holding a coat. It'll get colder when night falls. He draped the jacket over her shoulders with a casual ease, as if he had done it many times before. You don't have to do that. No, I don't, he said, but I want to. They remained silent as the waves murmured. Under the pale violet sky, gulls traced the horizon. Samuel spoke softly as if to himself. Do you know what impressed me the most? She turned. What, when you said don't move? He smiled faintly. Not everyone can order me around and survive. Victoria looked at him half embarrassed, half drawn in. I wasn't ordering. I was scared. And that fear saved me. He stopped, eyes fixed on the sunset. Strange, isn't it? People usually die from fear. I've lived because of it. Night came and the villa glowed in gentle gold. Victoria walked the corridor listening to the sea. Samuel's door was ajar and a sliver of light fell into the hallway. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the voice inside pulled her near. No, I don't trust it. They cannot know about her. Keep her secret understood. If anyone touches Victoria Reynolds, I'll bury his whole family at sea. Her heart seemed to stop. Samuel's tone was cold and ruthless, very different from the gentle man of the morning. She stepped back, and her foot made the faint creak of wood. The door opened. Samuel stood in the doorway, phone in hand. What are you doing here? I heard you, she stammered. He stepped closer. Expression unreadable. Heard? What, that you'd kill for me? He was still for a moment. Only the sea and her beating heart answered. Then he said slowly, I have killed for far less. Victoria clenched her fists. And I'm the latest reason. Maybe. His gaze softened, but his voice remained hoarse. You have interfered with my world, Victoria. From this moment, neither of us has a way back. She moved back, and his hand closed around her wrist. I won't hurt you, he said. But this world will. She looked at him, fear and curiosity mingling in her eyes. So what am I to you, Samuel? A debt. A captive. He bent closer, their faces inches apart. She could feel his breath on her skin. You are what forces me to choose power or peace. When he left, Victoria remained standing in the hallway. Night air swept through and the waves whispered below. A faint unease spread through her. Her life was about to change, not because of fear, but because of an emotion she had not yet named. She did not know that in a hidden bend beyond the hill, a black SUV sat idling. Inside, a man spoke into a radio. Target confirmed. Victoria Reynolds is with Samuel Harrison. Proceed with approach. On the passenger seat, a photograph slipped to the floor, her father, Daniel Reynolds, still alive. The morning at Samuel's seaside villa was so quiet that the wind slipping through the window frames could be heard. Gentle sunlight washed the wooden corridor. Light scattered across the floor like tiny mirrors. Victoria sat at the dining table, her coffee cooling in her hands, but her mind was still reeling from what he had said the night before. Your father used to work for me. That sentence repeated in her head like the echo of a memory that had never existed. She didn't believe it. Could not believe it. The man she knew, her gentle father, spent his days with history books tending tomato plants in the backyard, laughing when soil smeared his sleeves. He couldn't be part of the world Samuel Harrison ruled. A door opened softly. Samuel entered, composed as ever, a white shirt with the sleeves neatly rolled hair, still damp with morning mist. He set his phone on the table and looked at her. You haven't eaten. I'm not hungry. That feeling will pass, he said quietly. Once you know the truth. She looked up. What other truth do you have to tell me? Samuel did not answer right away. He took a small key from his jacket and placed it on the table. Your father left a house in Napa Valley. It's not in his name, it's in yours. I only learned because someone on my team discovered it a few days ago. A house? Victoria frowned. We never had a house outside San Diego. Maybe he didn't want you to know. He paused, his expression softening. I think it's time we went to see it. The black car rolled along the narrow road up into the Napa Hills. Ripe grapes hung heavy on the trellis. Sunlight struck them in warm golden patches, peaceful to the point of seeming unreal. Samuel was silent for the entire drive. He steered with one hand, focused, glancing at her in the mirror, only occasionally. Victoria sat quietly, a strange mix of unease and oddly safety rising in her chest. When the car stopped in front of an old ivy-clad manor, she nearly held her breath. Everything about the place felt familiar. The wooden chair on the porch, the faint scent of dried lavender on the breeze. Are you sure my father came here? She asked. Samuel nodded. This house was bought 20 years ago. According to the financial records, someone has been transferring money each month to keep up its maintenance. She stepped inside with cold palms. The house was tidy and unnervingly clean, as if someone still came every day. Everything was orderly, yet there were no signs of life. On the mantel hung a photograph that made her stop dead. Her father, at least 10 years younger, shaking hands with another man, Samuel, but younger, his gaze less shadowed. You, her voice caught. How long have you known my father? Samuel stood behind her, his voice even. Since I was 18. He was the first person to teach me to see the world by more than guns and power. He believed we could build a clean facade in a dirty world. Perhaps that's why he had to disappear. Victoria spun toward him, eyes wide. You say disappear? But you told me he withdrew. That is what I believed. Until my people reported someone had been surveilling you for months. I'm afraid Daniel didn't withdraw. He was forced to vanish. The room froze in silence. Outside, the wind moved through the old window frames, carrying the damp smell of time. Victoria walked slowly through the room, fingers brushing the books on the shelves, volumes on finance history, and a few notebooks handwritten in ink. Then she saw it. A small cupboard was locked. The key lay right beside it. She tried it. The lock opened. Inside was a thick envelope, the corners slightly yellowed. On the flap, a familiar line. To Victoria, if you find this, it means your father has gone. Her hands trembled. Samuel stepped back silently and let her sit on a chair. She opened the envelope. Inside were several handwritten pages, ink blurred at the edges, and a small USB drive wrapped in foil. She read aloud, voice quivering, "My beloved daughter. If you are reading this letter, it means the men your father trusted could not protect you from the storm to come. I know you will hate me for what I hid, but understand this. Everything I did was to keep you away from the darkness I sank into. Samuel Harrison is not the devil people make him out to be, but don't mistake him for a saint. He stands on the line between those worlds, and sometimes people like him must bear sins so others may live. If you want the truth, open the USB, but once you do, there's no turning back. I love you, Vic. Do not fear what you will see. Sometimes fear is what teaches you how to survive." She folded the letter, her hands shaking so badly the paper almost slipped from her lap. Samuel watched her, his expression hard to read. "Do you want me to look with you?" he asked softly. She nodded. He plugged the USB into an old laptop he retrieved from the drawer. The screen lit up showing a list of files, company names, account numbers, photos, audio recordings. Each file was a shard from an underworld puzzle. But what stunned Victoria into silence was a video that opened automatically. The footage showed her father sitting in an office facing an older silver-haired man, Viktor Vasilyev. "He wants to open shipping lanes through the Harrison port," Daniel said in the video. "If you agree, Samuel, you will owe him forever. He traffics people, children, women. I've seen the lists." A younger, colder voice of Samuel echoed from behind the camera. "And if I refuse, then he'll kill you. And perhaps me as well." The screen went black. Victoria lifted her head. Her lips trembled. "So, my father worked with him to protect you." Samuel was silent, his eyes cavernous. "Not only to protect me, to restrain me. He knew I wouldn't stop if there wasn't someone to remind me I was still human." His voice was rough, and in that moment, Victoria glimpsed a light in him that wasn't power. It was pain held too long. "And now," he said, squeezing her hand lightly, "it seems it's your turn to keep me from falling." Afternoon faded slowly. Sunlight filtered through the vines and painted Victoria's face in a pale gold. She stood at the window while Samuel bent over the laptop, her thoughts in turmoil. She had already lost so much in these few short days: her job, her peace, and the comforting belief that the world outside was safe. But amid the wreckage, what frightened her most was the inexplicable flutter inside her whenever he looked at her like that. "Samuel," she said softly. He looked up. "Yes, if all of this is true, if my father died to keep you alive." She stopped, eyes wet. "Should I hate you or thank you?" He stepped closer and stopped a breath away. "You owe me nothing. But if you want to understand him, you must stay long enough to learn why a man like Daniel Reynolds would trust someone like me." She met his gaze. For an instant, the distance between them dissolved. She felt his warm breath, the scent of his skin, and the faint trace of alcohol, an aroma that pushed every thought aside. "What are you more afraid of?" he asked in a low voice. "The truth or this feeling?" She did not answer because she did not yet know. On the drive back to the sea, the sky was dyed purple. Samuel drove slowly, his eyes distant. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. "My people reported someone is tracking you. A black SUV, not one of ours." Victoria clenched her fist. "Who? Unknown. But if your father is still alive..." He glanced at her. "That person may not be our enemy." A cold evening wind rushed in. She turned to look at him, trying to read his expression, but found only the stillness of someone long used to loss. The car rounded a bend, and streetlights reflected off the windshield. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing by the roadside, a tall man with streaks of gray in his hair. His gaze was so familiar, it made her heart stop. She spun to look again, but the figure had vanished. "Is something wrong?" Samuel asked. She answered, voice barely more than a breath. "No. I thought I saw my father." Samuel tightened his grip on the wheel. A dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. Then Victoria. The game is truly beginning. Winter rain slid slowly down the windows, tracing glittering paths in the city lights. In the grand room of the seaside villa, Victoria sat curled up beside the fireplace, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames, as if the answers to 100 unanswered questions might be hiding there. Since leaving Napa Valley, she hadn't slept. The image of the man by the roadside haunted her, his posture, his coat, the silver in his hair. Everything about him had been too much like her father. She wanted to believe it was just her imagination. But deep down, she knew the father. She believed Dead was still out there watching from the shadows. Samuel entered, his white shirt damp from the rain. He set his gun on the table, loosened his tie, every movement precise, detached as though the storm outside meant nothing to him. "You're still awake," he said, his voice rough from the cold. "How could I sleep?" she murmured, "knowing someone's watching me? It could be my father or someone who wants to kill me. Either way, I can't close my eyes." Samuel said nothing. He poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her one. "There are nights when only alcohol helps you forget what you're afraid of." She met his eyes, her fingers brushing the rim of the glass. "Do you drink to forget or to remember?" A faint smile touched his lips, one that never reached his eyes. "Sometimes, both." He sat across from her. The firelight flickered over his face, carving shadows into his weary features. "My men just called. Someone in the FBI has started looking into Napa Valley." "A woman named Claire Morgan." Victoria froze. "I know that name. She called me last week, said she knew something about my father. I thought it was a scam." "It wasn't," Samuel said quietly, swirling the wine. "Claire used to work for me. Years ago. She was one of your people, she was. Not anymore." He paused, as if choosing each word carefully. "She was an undercover agent planted inside my organization. When I found out, I let her go instead of killing her. She said she'd leave this world behind, but clearly she didn't keep her promise. So what does she want now? Truth, perhaps. Or revenge." The words sent a chill down Victoria's spine. She set the glass down. "And what will you do?" Samuel stood and walked to the window, watching the rain cascade like silver curtains. "If she wants the truth, I'll give it to her. But if she wants revenge..." He turned back, eyes flashing like lightning. "I won't let anyone touch you." Victoria exhaled, torn between fear and something dangerously close to tenderness. There was something in his tone, something that told her Samuel didn't distinguish between protecting and possessing. Everything he touched became his. 2 days later, the skies cleared. Samuel left early for a meeting in Los Angeles. Victoria stayed behind with Mrs. Vega, the elderly housekeeper, whose eyes seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. "Mr. Harrison rarely lets women stay in this house," Mrs. Vega said, while pouring tea, glancing at Victoria. "The last time was over 8 years ago." "Who was she?" Victoria asked. The old woman smiled sadly. "An FBI agent named Claire Morgan." Victoria froze. "What did you just say, Mr. Harrison saved her from an explosion. They were close. But then she disappeared, leaving only a letter. What did it say?" "That sometimes loving someone isn't enough to make them clean." The room fell silent. Victoria said nothing, her chest tightening with an ache she couldn't name, half sympathy, half jealousy. She stepped onto the balcony. The sea below was a deep sapphire, the wind carrying the scent of salt and sand. She closed her eyes, trying to push away the image of Samuel and the woman named Claire. But the harder she tried, the heavier her heart became. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Vega answered, then returned looking uneasy. "There's someone asking for you, Miss Reynolds." She says, "She's an old friend." Victoria stepped into the foyer. A woman stood there, mid-30s, dark brown hair, gray eyes, sharp and steady. She wore a black coat and carried herself with the quiet authority of someone used to danger, Claire Morgan. The woman said, her voice low and clear, "We need to talk." Victoria hesitated, then nodded. They sat in the living room, sunlight spilling across the table and glinting off Claire's glass of water. "I didn't come here to hurt you," Claire began. "But you deserve to know the truth about the man protecting you." "He's told me enough," Victoria said softly. "Enough?" Claire gave a bitter smile. "Did he tell you he once ordered the execution of 3 FBI agents for investigating the wrong man? Or that he used your father as a pawn to launder money for the Harrison Group?" Victoria's face went pale. "You're lying." "I have proof." Claire placed a folder on the table. "Inside are voice recordings, your father's voice. He worked for Harrison in exchange for medication. When he tried to leave, Samuel wouldn't let him. Do you know why your father disappeared?" Victoria's hands turned cold. She opened the folder pages of transactions photos, and then the recording started to play Samuel. "I can't keep doing this. I was wrong. I don't want Vic involved. Please let me walk away." Then another voice, deep and cold. "You know too much, Daniel. Walk away and you'll still be pulled back in." That voice, she knew it. "Samuel." Victoria shot to her feet. "Stop it." Claire met her eyes filled with sorrow. "I understand you want to believe him. I once did too. But Harrison only loves in the way a destroyer does. Stay with him, and one day fear will be all that's left." When Samuel returned that night, darkness had settled over the villa. He walked into the room, exhaustion etched across his face. "You're still up. I had company." He frowned. "Who, Claire Morgan?" The name froze him. "What did she say?" "That you betrayed my father. That he didn't die of illness, but because you wouldn't let him live." For several seconds, Samuel said nothing. His gaze darkened heavy and unreadable. "And you believe her?" "I don't know." "But the recording fake," he said sharply. "Do you have proof?" "I don't need it," he replied. "Because I know what I didn't say." He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. "Claire's playing her old game. She wants you to turn against me because it's the only way she can hurt me." And if she's telling the truth, Samuel was silent for a moment. Then he placed both hands on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Victoria, if you trust me, leave tonight. Don't ask questions. Don't look back. But if you want the whole truth, stay. Just know once you do, there's no going back." Her breath trembled. "And if I stay?" His eyes softened like her answer had just pulled him back from the edge. "Then I'll tell you everything. Even the things that might make you hate me forever." That night, the rain returned. In the quiet room, Samuel spoke of Daniel Reynolds, the man who had been his mentor, his advisor, his moral compass, the father he never had. "He didn't die because of me," Samuel said hoarsely. "He died saving me. When Viktor Vasilyev set the trap, your father misled him, made him believe he'd turned on me. I came too late. When I found him, his last words were, 'Protect her.'" Tears streamed down Victoria's cheeks. He sat still, not touching her, just staring at the fading fire. "I promised I'd keep you safe from this world. But your presence, it's dragging me back into it." She looked at him and saw not a monster, but a man bearing too much guilt to ever be forgiven. "Samuel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "If that's true, then why does the recording exist?" He turned to her eyes, sharp as steel. "Because someone wants to erase everything Daniel did. And to do that, they need to make me the killer." Outside, thunder split the sky. Victoria shivered, realizing something with chilling clarity. The real storm had only just begun. And this time, it wasn't just out at sea. Morning rain fell cold over San Diego. Droplets streaked down the glass window, ticking like a clock counting down. Victoria sat motionless on the sofa in the villa's living room, hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold. She hadn't slept. Every word Samuel had spoken the night before still echoed in her mind, tangled between love and guilt. "I didn't kill your father, Victoria. I owe him my life. And yet the image of Claire Morgan, her file, her recordings, her pitying gaze cut through like a blade. Two conflicting truths pulled her in opposite directions until her heart began to crack in silence. The door opened. Samuel stepped in. He had been gone since dawn, no one knew where. Rain still clung to his hair, and the shoulders of his dark shirt making him look both distant and worn. "You haven't eaten," he said quietly. "I'm not hungry, because you don't believe me anymore." Victoria looked up. His gaze came at her like a wave, gentle yet impossible to withstand. "I don't know who to believe," she whispered. "Claire has evidence. You only have words." Samuel smiled faintly, but the sadness outweighed the anger. "And you need proof to believe your own heart," she didn't answer. Part of her wanted to trust him, but reason screamed that loving a man like Samuel Harrison was nothing short of walking willingly off a cliff. He moved closer, sitting in front of her. The scent of rain on his skinwood and faint tobacco hit her with a pang of familiarity that hurt. "I found this in Napa," he said, placing a small wooden box on the table. "It was hidden in the wall behind your father's portrait." Victoria opened it. Inside was a worn leather notebook, the handwriting instantly recognizable, her father's slanted and careful. October 14th. "If I'm gone, trust that Samuel is not the monster. But he's being hunted. Someone is using my past to bring him down." "Project Seraphim, that's the key." Victoria frowned. "What is Seraphim?" Samuel's tone darkened. "A human trafficking network run by Viktor Vasilyev. Your father and I tried to dismantle it, but we didn't have enough evidence. After he died, every trace vanished. I think someone's trying to reopen that route, and they're using my name to cover it." "And who would do that?" He met her eyes. "It could be Claire, or someone inside the FBI. But there's another possibility." He paused, voice dropping. "That your father left behind something they want." That afternoon, they drove to Daniel Reynolds' old storage unit. The room was buried beneath a small library, dusty cold, filled with the silence of things long forgotten. Victoria ran her trembling fingers along the objects. Folders, faded photographs, a portrait of her mother. Each felt like a frozen piece of memory. Samuel stood a few steps away, quietly watching. Light filtered through a small window, illuminating half his face, one side bright, the other in shadow, perfectly matching the man himself. "Did my father ever talk to you about my mother?" she asked, voice raspy. "Once," he said softly. "He told me she was the only reason he still believed people could be saved." Victoria gave a weak smile. "Maybe that's why he believed in you." They discovered a small hard drive hidden beneath the drawer. Samuel plugged it into his laptop. Files appeared most encrypted. Only one would open a video. The footage was dimly lit, the camera set in a corner. A man's voice, her father, spoke rough and uneven. "If anyone finds this recording, know that I didn't die from illness. I'm being hunted. Samuel doesn't know. I'm doing this to protect him. But if he finds out, tell him don't trust anyone inside the organization. There's a traitor." Then came hurried footsteps, a door creaking open, a gunshot, the screen went black. Victoria froze, tears falling silently onto the keyboard. He was alive when this was recorded. Samuel's fists clenched. His jaw tightened, his composure faltering for the first time. "And someone made sure I never saw it." She turned to him, voice trembling. Then Claire lied. "She didn't have to," Samuel replied darkly. "She just had to make you think I could lie." Night fell when they returned to the villa. The house was unnervingly quiet. Mrs. Vega had gone to bed. The sea roared outside like a warning. Samuel sat alone in the library, staring into a glass of untouched wine. Victoria entered, still holding her father's notebook. She stood for a long moment before speaking softly. "Yeah, if my father is still alive." "What will you do?" He looked up, eyes deep as the abyss. "I'll find him. And if someone's keeping him captive, I'll make them disappear. You can't solve everything with violence," she said. He gave a faint, tired smile. "In my world, it's the only language people understand." "In my world," she replied quietly, "people understand through trust." Her words stilled him, silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of waves. He rose slowly, walked toward her, stopping just a breath away. Then, tell me, Victoria, do you trust me? Tears shimmered in her eyes. I want to. But every time I try, something pulls me back. He lifted a hand, brushing a tear from her cheek. If you need proof, I'll give you proof. But it may cost you everything you've ever believed. He pulled a black envelope from his jacket. Inside was a photograph Claire Morgan, shaking hands with Viktor Vasilyev, taken in an elegant Los Angeles restaurant. This was taken 2 days ago, he said. The woman you thought was an ally is dining with the man who murdered your father. Victoria stared, her throat tightening. No, that can't be. We've all been played, Samuel said quietly. Your father, me, and now you. Her tears fell freely now. I don't even know who I am anymore, Samuel. The daughter of a money launderer, the lover of a mafia boss, or just another pawn in your game. He grasped her shoulders, firm but gentle, his eyes burning with desperate sincerity. You're not a pawn. You're the only reason I still want to end this game. She looked at him, her breath catching. In his eyes, dark, fierce, heavy with shadows, she saw something that terrified her as much as it pulled her in. And if I walk away? He didn't hesitate. I'll let you go, but never come back to San Diego. If you stay, they'll use you to kill me. She stood motionless, torn between reason and feeling. His words rang true, yet his voice, low and aching, made it impossible to leave. Finally, she whispered, If this is a game, then maybe I need to stay and see who's moving the pieces. Samuel closed his eyes, a faint smile breaking through. You're walking into a place with no return, Victoria Reynolds. Maybe she said, her voice trembling but steady. But you forget I was the one who told you first. Don't move. I've never known fear. Their eyes locked. For a long heartbeat, neither spoke. Then Samuel pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if the world might collapse around them. Outside, the wind howled through the windows, carrying the distant rumble of thunder. Somewhere in the darkness, a phone buzzed and a man's voice came through a radio. Confirming. Target, Harrison is tagged. They're together. Prepare for Phase 2. The storm had arrived, and this time neither of them stood on safe ground. The night sea looked like a shattered mirror. Waves crashed against the rocks, scattering white foam, while distant lights flickered on the surface like fragments of memories that could never fit together again. The storm had arrived sooner than expected. Wind howled through the corridors of the Harrison villa, rattling the glass doors with every gust. Victoria stood by the window, her eyes lost in the dark. She hadn't spoken to Samuel in 2 days, not since discovering Claire's alliance with Vasilyev. Her emotions swirled in turmoil, fear, anger, longing, and something deeper, an undertow she could no longer suppress. Behind her, the door opened. Samuel entered, rain dripping from his coat, a sealed envelope in his hand. Under the amber light, his face looked hollow, his gaze still cold but no longer unyielding. You're still awake, he said, his voice rough. I haven't slept peacefully since I met you. He paused for a beat, then set the envelope on the table. We need to leave tonight. Someone planted a tracking device in the villa. Claire again. No. This time it's Vasilyev's men. His tone dropped lower. They know you're alive, and they believe you have your father's data. But I don't... That doesn't matter, he cut her off. What matters is they believe you do. She looked at him, her eyes trembling. Then where will we go? The Los Angeles port. I have a shipment leaving at midnight. After that, I'll handle the rest. She stared at him for a long moment. And you're not going to tell me what handle means, are you? Samuel's jaw tightened. You don't need to know, Victoria. You just have to trust me. She gave a faint, bitter smile. Trust again. Funny, isn't it, how the man I love keeps asking me to believe in things I don't understand? Something flickered behind his eyes, but he said nothing. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she might vanish into the storm outside. I'm not good at keeping promises, he murmured against her ear, but if there's one I can keep, it's that no one will ever touch you. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of him melt the cold fear inside. For a moment, the world disappeared, leaving only heartbeats reign, and two lost souls finding each other in the chaos. The black SUV sped through the downpour. Los Angeles glowed on the horizon, headlights streaking across the slick road like running veins of light. Samuel gripped the wheel, tension sharp in his posture. Victoria sat beside him, clutching her seatbelt. "Are you sure they can't track us?" "Nothing's certain," he said, "but I've jammed every signal I could." Rain pounded the windshield, wind slashing across the car like bullets. She turned to the window, her reflection pale. Then she saw another vehicle pulling alongside, headlights blinding them. Samuel. He glanced over just in time, two men in the other car, guns drawn. He swerved sharply, tires screeching as bullets shattered the glass beside them. "Get down!" he shouted. She screamed, ducking low. Samuel floored the gas. The SUV tore through the storm like a wounded beast refusing to die. Behind them, horns blared, gunfire echoed, chaos chasing them into the night. At last, he veered onto a road along the docks, slamming the brakes. The car skidded and stopped behind a stack of shipping containers. He jumped out, gun in hand, breath ragged and face streaked with rain. "Out the back," he ordered. "We go on foot." She nodded shakily. Together, they ran along the metal corridors of cargo containers, rain hammering on steel above them. In the distance, a cargo ship's lights flickered, the last vessel leaving the harbor. "What happens when we get there?" she panted. "I have people on that ship. They'll take you, and you, I stay." She froze. "No, you can't leave me." "Victoria, listen." He turned, voice firm. "If I go, they'll trace you. You're the target. I'm the shield." She shook her head, rain mixing with tears. "I don't need protection, Samuel. I need you." He looked at her with quiet anguish, then stepped close, gripping her shoulders. "If I live, they'll never stop. But if I die," he smiled faintly, "maybe they'll believe it's over." "Don't you dare say that." Wind tore at his coat, rain pelting down like the wrath of the heavens. He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face, his voice softening. "Some people are born to be loved. Others are born to protect the ones they love, even if it means being cruel." She met his gaze through tears. "And which one are you? I'm the sinner who still dared to love." A sudden explosion lit the sky. The pursuing SUV had erupted into flames. Fire blazed against the storm. Samuel pulled her down, shielding her as shards of metal rained onto the pier. "Run!" he shouted. "To the ship! No, you're coming with me!" He pushed her toward the staircase leading to the deck. "Go, Vic!" "Samuel!" Gunfire cracked again. He turned, firing back, muzzle flashes illuminating his determined face. A bullet grazed his shoulder, crimson spreading through his shirt. She screamed, rushing to catch him. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing, just a scratch." He forced a smile, but blood streamed down, diluted by rain, into pale red. "You're lying." He steadied himself, resting a trembling hand on her cheek. "Don't look at me like that. I don't want the last thing you remember to be a man about to fall." "Stop talking." Her hand brushed his lips, trembling. "If you want me to live, then live with me." He smiled softly, eyes glowing like lanterns through the mist. "You really are the only person who's ever made me forget how to be cruel." A foghorn blared. The ship was departing. Samuel looked toward the sea, then back at her. "Go." She shook her head, tears lost in the rain. "I'm not leaving you." He gazed at her eyes, tender, those of a man who had lost everything, but found one reason to keep breathing. He bent down and kissed her. A kiss in the rain, fierce, trembling, eternal, a vow spoken without words. Amid the downpour, gunfire, and the fading horn of the ship, Samuel whispered, "I've killed to survive. But since meeting you, I've only wanted to live." She clung to him, trembling. "Then don't leave me." He nodded faintly, his smile a quiet promise in the storm. "I won't." A deafening explosion shook the docks. One of the warehouses ignited flames, blooming against the dark sea. Samuel pulled her down again, covering her with his body. His breath came fast, warm, and wet. Smoke thickened, shouts echoed. Police lights flashed in the distance. Sirens screaming through the storm. Samuel helped her up, blood still dripping from his shoulder, but his eyes blazed with purpose. "We're done running," he said. "It's time to strike back." Victoria's voice broke. "What are you going to do? lead them somewhere they can't return from. He reloaded his gun voice like steel. And you'll end it. How? He touched her coat pocket gently. With what your father left behind. Victoria reached in, pulling out the foil-wrapped USB drive. The Seraphim data, Samuel murmured. If you release it, both Vasiliev and Claire will burn. But when you do, you'll destroy everything tied to me too. She met his gaze, her eyes gleaming through the storm. If I have to choose between you and the truth, I'll choose what saves us both. He chuckled weakly, blood on his lips. And if there's no such choice, then I'll save you, and let the world handle itself. They stood there in the rain, silent. Every second stretched thin, filled only by the crash of waves and the beating of their hearts. From afar, headlights sliced through the fog, a convoy of black vehicles closing in. Samuel grabbed her hand. Hold on to me. And in that moment, amid storm and fire, blood and smoke, two souls caught between love and damnation found the same truth, a reason to live no matter what tomorrow might bring. The morning air in Los Angeles was thick with smoke and salt. The storm had passed, leaving a scar across the sky, long, raw, and silent. The sea was calmer now, but Victoria's heart was not. She sat in a small room, hidden deep within an abandoned warehouse, a place Samuel once used as a secret communications outpost. A dim yellow bulb flickered above, casting a fragile light over the map spread across the table. Red dots blinked across its surface satellite trackers, each one marking a potential threat. Samuel leaned against the window, his black shirt stiff with dried blood on the shoulder. He hadn't let anyone touch the wound. All night he had said nothing, just smoked one cigarette after another, eyes drifting somewhere far away, as if searching the past for a truth he didn't want to find. Victoria watched him, her chest tightening. There was something in his gaze, something that told her he had learned a truth too heavy to share. You still haven't told me everything about last night, she said quietly. He turned, his expression softening. You should rest. Samuel, she pressed. I've come too far to stop now. Tell me who set us up. He was silent for a long time before answering slowly. Someone inside my own circle. Someone I trusted. Her breath caught. Who? Lucas. The name left his lips like a wound reopening. He was my right hand for 8 years. I pulled him out of a prison cell, gave him a family, a name. And now he's sold me to Vasiliev. Victoria shuddered. Are you sure I don't need to be sure? He said grimly. I have a recording his call with Claire. They planned to abduct your father. Her eyes widened. Abduct? You mean he's alive? Samuel nodded slightly, a faint flicker of hope breaking through his fatigue. Yes, and Lucas is using him to force me to hand over the Seraphim data. That afternoon, Samuel drove her to a decaying villa on the outskirts of Malibu, once used by Lucas to manage a weapons depot. From afar, the walls were overgrown with moss. Windows cracked like eyes that had seen too much and never closed. Before entering, Samuel handed her a small earpiece. Listen to me and only move when I say so. No matter what happens, don't come out. Victoria gripped the earpiece. What are you going to do? Bring him into the light. He gave a cold, almost sorrowful smile. I've lived long enough to know nothing hurts more than killing the man who once called you brother. Inside the villa, dust swirled in the weak daylight filtering through shattered windows. Samuel's footsteps echoed steady and sharp. He stopped in the center of the room, voice low but calm. Come out, Lucas. I know you're here. From the shadows, a tall man emerged. A sleek black suit, slicked back hair, and a face that once radiated loyalty, now hardened with arrogance. You came quicker than I expected, Lucas said evenly. I thought you'd be halfway to Mexico by now with your little damsel. She's not your concern. On the contrary, Samuel, he sneered. Everything that's yours has always been mine to deal with, because I've lived under your shadow too long. Samuel's grip tightened on his gun. You could have had anything, money, power, even this empire. Why her? Why her father? Lucas's smile was thin and cold. Because they're your only weakness. And in this world, weakness is the most valuable currency there is. The air-cracked gunfire erupted. Samuel ducked a bullet grazing his arm. He returned fire, 2 quick shots. Bullets splintered the wall behind Lucas. The room filled with gun smoke and the metallic taste of danger. Through the earpiece, Victoria heard everything, her pulse pounding in her ears. She wanted to rush in, but Samuel's voice echoed in her mind. Don't come out, no matter what. The gunfight lasted only minutes, but for her it stretched into eternity. Then, silence. Samuel's voice came through hoarse but steady. Who's pulling your strings, Lucas Vasiliev? Or, Claire Morgan? Lucas gave a ragged laugh, the kind that belonged to a dying man. Both. But she's smarter than him. Claire only wants the Seraphim data. Vasiliev wants your blood. And you, Samuel asked quietly. Who did you choose? Lucas's smile cracked. Myself. Another explosion shattered the stillness. Victoria sprang to her feet. Samuel's shout crackling through the earpiece. Victoria, don't! She burst through the door. Smoke filled the room. The air stank of gunpowder. Lucas lay sprawled on the floor, blood seeping into the wooden boards. Samuel stood nearby, gun in hand, his face empty of emotion. You killed him? She whispered. No. Samuel's voice was low. He pulled the pin on a grenade, wanted to erase the evidence. But I got what I needed. He held up a scorched phone. His last message coordinates to where your father's being held. She grabbed his arm. Then what are we waiting for? He looked at her for a long time, for the storm to pass, and for you to be ready. That night they hid in a small house by the sea. Moonlight shimmered across the waves, fractured in silver. It fell through the window, painting her skin in soft light. She sat on the bed watching as he wrapped his wound. His movements were steady, deliberate, not a sound, though blood still seeped through the gauze. Samuel, she whispered. Have you ever been afraid of dying? No. His voice was low. But since meeting you, I've learned to fear. Fear what? Waking up one day and not seeing you. She lowered her head. Don't say that. I don't want to be the reason you lose your edge. You don't understand. He looked up, eyes locking onto hers. Before you, all I knew was killing or surviving. But since you, I've wanted to save. For the first time, I know what it means to be human. She sat beside him, fingers brushing the bandage on his shoulder. Your humanity. It's bleeding. He gave a quiet, pained smile. Maybe because it only exists when you're near. In that moment, there was no sound, no wind, no waves. Only their eyes meeting, holding understanding. She leaned forward and kissed the scar on his neck, a wordless kiss that made time itself pause. Samuel closed his eyes. His hand slid to her waist, not in possession, but in protection, as if afraid she might fade if he let go. Near dawn, Victoria woke to find him sitting by the window, staring at the horizon. You haven't slept. I can't. Because of me, because of everything. He turned, voice heavy. We're out of time. Claire's left Los Angeles. I think she's with Vasiliev's men. So what now? We find your father, he said, and we end Seraphim. She walked to him, the moonlight catching the gold in his eyes. You know this mission could kill you. I do, and you'll still go. He smiled faintly. I've never been good at stopping halfway. Her heart clenched. She wanted to beg him not to go, but she couldn't. Because deep down, she knew this man wasn't born for peace. He belonged to storms. And maybe she was the only storm he could never conquer. Samuel, she whispered, if we make it out alive, will you leave? He looked at her gently. If you tell me to, I will. But if you stay silent, I'll stay. A soft, trembling smile touched her lips. Then I'll stay silent. He reached out, brushing his fingers along her cheek. You're the only quiet I've ever known. Outside, dawn began to break. Waves rolled softly against the shore, carrying the scent of salt and something like hope. A new day had begun, but between them, something had shifted. No more doubt, no more fear. Only a quiet resolve to walk into the darkness together, even if there was no way back. Los Angeles lay beneath a thin veil of mist, streetlights bleeding into blurred halos of gold. Above, a helicopter cut through the night, its blades thundering like the heartbeat of a restless giant. Samuel and Victoria hid inside an abandoned warehouse near the docks, one of the few places invisible to satellite scans. Inside, the only light came from an open laptop. On its glowing screen, a digital map pulsed with moving red dots. In the corner, a new coordinate appeared, marked with the code name Project Seraphim, Node 47. Victoria's voice trembled. Is that where my father's being held? Samuel nodded slightly, his eyes locked on the flickering numbers. If Lucas told the truth, that's Vasiliev's data hub. Not just your father, probably everyone who ever helped him hide the evidence. She looked at him carefully. You plan to go alone, don't you? No. His gaze met hers, steady yet softer than usual. This time, I'm not leaving you behind, because I'm bait, because you're the only reason I still want this to end. Silence filled the space between them, thick as the dust in the air. The wind howled through the broken steel panels, carrying the scent of rain and rust. At dawn, they left his warehouse and drove east toward the desert. The road stretched endlessly through the pale light, the sand tinted gray and gold, as if the world itself had forgotten how to feel warmth. Samuel drove in silence. Sunlight cut across his face, equal parts exhaustion and resolve. Victoria studied him through the rearview mirror. Something about him had changed. He no longer looked like the cold, unshakable man she had met weeks ago. He looked human, tired, haunted. Have you ever regretted it? She asked softly. Regretted what? Choosing this life, the mafia, the power, the blood. Samuel smiled faintly, eyes still on the road. When you're standing in the middle of a battlefield, you stop thinking about right or wrong. You just try to survive. Until one day, someone makes you want to live, not just exist. And that someone is me. He didn't answer. But the small curve at the corner of his lips was enough. By noon, they arrived at an abandoned research compound buried in the desert, surrounded by electric fences and infrared cameras. Samuel used a decoder to bypass the security gate. They slipped inside, footsteps echoing faintly across the cold concrete. Dim light streamed through cracks in the ceiling. The walls were scarred with bullet holes and moss. Old computers blinked weakly on dusty tables, ghosts of a system that refused to die. Someone's still here, Samuel whispered, drawing his gun. Victoria followed close behind. They reached a steel door with an electronic lock. Samuel slid Lucas's keycard into the scanner, a soft beep, and the door clicked open. The air smelled of metal and ash, and in the center of the room sat a man, silver-haired and gaunt, bound to a metal chair. Dad! Victoria gasped and rushed forward. Samuel caught her arm. Wait! He switched on his flashlight. Daniel Reynolds blinked against the light. His eyes were weary, but there was still a sharp intelligence in them, terrifyingly lucid. Victoria! His voice was hoarse. You shouldn't have come. I came to save you. He smiled weakly, a gentle, broken smile. No one comes to this place and leaves alive, sweetheart. Samuel stepped closer, cutting the restraints. Mr. Reynolds, we don't have time. We need to go. Daniel turned his head toward him, and for a second lightning flashed behind his gaze. Samuel Harrison, you still haven't learned how to trust? Have you? Samuel froze. What are you talking about? You think Lucas betrayed you, Daniel said quietly. He didn't. He was following orders. Whose orders? Claire Morgan's. And she's not working alone. Victoria's pulse quickened. Then who else? Daniel nodded faintly. Seraphim isn't just Vasiliev's network. It's an international project funded by the very people you once called your partners. Samuel's voice darkened. You're lying. No, Daniel said softly. You were part of it without even realizing it. Seraphim was designed to launder money through humanitarian foundations. When you started cleaning up the trade routes, you cost them millions. Now they want to erase every trace, starting with you. The air thickened. Samuel stood motionless, the knife still in his hand, but his eyes had gone hollow. You were used, Victoria whispered. Samuel's jaw tightened. And I killed for the very people who betrayed me. Daniel sighed. You can't save everyone, Samuel, but you can save her. He turned to his daughter, eyes filled with regret and love. Victoria, you have to leave. The data on that USB drive isn't just evidence, it's a weapon. If it falls into the wrong hands, thousands will die. Tears welled up in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wanted you to live. Samuel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. He's right. This isn't the time for questions. They've found us. From the hallway, the rhythmic thud of boots echoed closer. Laser sights swept across the doorframe. The special ops unit was closing in. Samuel helped Daniel to his feet. Is there another way out? Downstairs? Daniel gasped. An old air duct, it leads to the desert. They ran. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets sparking against the walls. Samuel shielded them both, returning fire as they sprinted through the smoke. They tumbled through the basement door down a flight of rusted stairs. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow ventilation tunnel. Go, Samuel ordered. I'll hold them off. Victoria turned, panicked. No, you can't. He stepped closer, his voice low but unwavering. You and your father are the only reason my life means anything. Samuel. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile she knew she'd remember forever. Go, Victoria. Don't let me die for nothing. She wanted to protest, but Daniel pulled her away. And as the metal door closed behind them, she caught one last glimpse of Samuel standing beneath flashing red lights surrounded by smoke and the storm of bullets. The red light cut across his face, setting his amber eyes ablaze, not with guilt, but with the quiet resolve of a man who had finally chosen to sacrifice himself for love. The door slammed shut. An explosion roared behind them. An hour later, the desert shimmered under the pale moonlight. Two figures stumbled out of the ventilation shaft, Victoria supporting her father, both covered in dust and blood. She turned back toward the horizon where the distant compound still burned flames, glowing faintly like dying embers. There was no sign of Samuel. Nothing. Dad! Her voice cracked. He won't. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. Don't say it. If anyone can survive that fire, it's him. The wind howled, carrying the scent of smoke and salt from the faraway sea. Victoria closed her eyes, feeling her father's labored breath, her own heartbeat, and the hollow ache of loss. Far away atop a desert ridge, a lone figure stood against the wind. Samuel. His eyes glinted under the moonlight, his hair streaked with ash. He didn't move closer. He simply turned away, fading into the darkness, leaving behind deep footprints in the sand. A man who had lost everything, except the belief that she was still alive. A week had passed since the inferno in the desert. News of the mysterious explosion at Vasiliev Corporation's abandoned research facility flooded every network, but no one truly knew what had happened. No bodies were found. No traces remained. And there was no sign of Samuel Harrison. Los Angeles had returned to its usual rhythm. Yet in a private hospital, high above the city, Victoria woke each night drenched in the same nightmare. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing amid the smoke, and the pulsing red light, his last gaze like a beam cutting through the storm. It was so vivid, so haunting, it stole her breath away. Daniel was recovering slowly. Years of captivity had left him frail, but his eyes still held their sharp, weary intelligence. He spoke little, carrying a weight that even death would not have washed away. That morning, he sat by the window watching sunlight filter weakly through the curtains. You haven't eaten, he said. Victoria shook her head, clutching her cold cup of coffee. I can't. Not until I know if he's alive. Daniel studied her for a long time, then said quietly, If there's anyone who can walk out of hell alive, it's Samuel Harrison. You still trust him? After everything? A faint smile crossed his lips. You don't understand, Victoria. A man only becomes truly dangerous when he finds a reason to live. And for Samuel, that reason is you. She said nothing. Inside her chest, her heart stumbled, trembling with hope she was too afraid to believe in. That night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, she sat at the desk and opened the last USB, the one Samuel had left for her. A hidden folder appeared labeled simply, In case I don't return. She clicked it. A video began to play. Samuel sat in a dimly lit room, one she recognized. The light cast half his face in shadow, his voice low and steady, carrying that quiet melancholy that only comes from a man who has already touched his fate. Victoria, if you're watching this, it means I'm no longer there. I don't believe in destiny, but maybe fate has always known how to collect its debts. Whether I live or die, I want you to know I never regretted letting you into my world. You taught me that even in the dark, people can still love. His voice broke slightly, then a soft, almost boyish smile, raw and real. Don't look for me, because if I'm still alive, I'll find you. The video ended. She sat there for a long time, her hand pressed to the black screen, tears falling soundlessly. 3 days later, Daniel was moved to a safe house on the outskirts of the city. Victoria returned to her empty apartment carrying the USB and a letter her father had left behind. Daughter, the truth doesn't end when we survive. It begins when we dare to face what's left. She knew he was right. Claire Morgan was still free. Vasiliev had vanished from the global map. Seraphim wasn't dead, only sleeping. And she, the only one holding the key, was now the hunted. That night, as cold wind whispered through the window, she heard a sound. The door creaked open. A shadow stepped inside. Her instincts kicked in. She reached for the gun under her desk, but then a familiar voice froze her in place. You haven't changed. Still stubborn, still unafraid of dying. She turned sharply. Samuel stood there half-lit by the warm yellow glow. Dust clung to his dark coat, a thin scar traced down his cheek to his jaw, but his eyes, those deep amber eyes, hadn't changed. For a moment she couldn't speak. She just walked towards him trembling and touched his face. You're alive. He smiled faintly. I told you, remember, I don't die that easily. She laughed through tears, half sobbing. You disappeared. No message, nothing. I thought I had to disappear. His voice was hoarse, exhausted. They were hunting you. I needed them to believe I was dead. You were injured, not as much as I was when I lost you. The words stopped her breath. In that instant, all the distance between them, the blood, the guilt, the secrets vanished. Two souls stripped bare found each other again, in a silence that forgave everything. He pulled her into his arms. His hand slid gently to the back of her neck. His scent smoke rained gunpowder enveloping her. Where did you go? She whispered. Mexico. One of my old bases. I had to erase every trace they could use, and... He hesitated. I found something you need to see. He placed a small, leather-wrapped hard drive on the table. This is the complete list of Seraphim's real shareholders. Claire's name is there. And... He paused, his expression darkened. There's another name you need to see. She opened the file and froze. Vincent Reynolds. No. That's impossible, she whispered. That's my grandfather. My father never said he was alive. Samuel nodded. He didn't die. He disappeared to build Seraphim. Daniel thought he was dead, so he spent his life trying to atone for his father's sins. Don't you see Victoria Seraphim as the blood legacy of your own family? She stumbled back, tears blurring her vision. No, I can't. He reached for her shoulders. Listen to me. This isn't your fault. You didn't choose this. But I'm a Reynolds. I carry the blood of the man who created that monster. Samuel's grip tightened, his voice low and resolute. And you're also the only one who can end it. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks. Inside, silence reigned. Victoria sat motionless, staring at an old photo inside the file Vincent Reynolds, his smile sharp, his eyes chillingly similar to Daniel's. Memories crashed over her childhood evenings in their small house. The way her father went silent whenever she mentioned his father, the look in his eyes that always seemed haunted. It had all been the echo of a guilt greater than life itself. Samuel stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker. His voice was soft, almost sorrowful. You have a choice, Victoria. We can disappear live somewhere no one knows us, start over. Or end Seraphim. He turned toward her. And with it, maybe end us too. She met his gaze, her eyes strangely calm. Do you really think I could live knowing I'm part of that monster? He stepped closer, his hand trembling as he cupped her face. You're not a monster. No, but I have its blood. He looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, Then let me do what monsters never can die so someone else can be free. No, Samuel. He smiled tired but tender. If I die, just remember, I lived once the moment I saw you. She broke down, clutching him tightly as if she could hold back time itself. That night they lay together in silence. No promises, no future. Only breath against breath, warm, desperate human. Outside Los Angeles was unnervingly still, as if the storm itself was holding its breath before the next strike. Before dawn, Samuel whispered, Tomorrow, I'll take you to Seraphim's final site, where all answers end. Victoria opened her eyes, gazing at him through the dim light. And if it's a place you can't come back from? He smiled faintly. Then I'll wait for you. Somewhere the darkness can't reach. She didn't know if she was crying or smiling. All she knew was that in that moment, their love needed no promises, no tomorrows. It only needed to exist, a beautiful scar between two souls that had already been broken. Early morning in San Francisco was wrapped in fog. Sunlight broke gently through low clouds, painting the city in a pale gold, like a memory that refused to fade. Victoria stood by the hotel window, her eyes distant as she gazed across the bay, where the water shimmered with the soft glow of something she had long forgotten, the light of peace, a light she once thought she would never touch again. Samuel was still asleep. He lay on his side, one hand resting loosely on the white sheets, his dark skin marked with faint scars that had begun to fade. His face, calm in rest, seemed softer, so rare, that she found herself unable to look away. She leaned down quietly, her fingers brushing the scar on his cheek, the last remnant of the man he used to be. Last night they had returned to the city, carrying with them the hard drive containing the true list of Seraphim's shareholders, a file powerful enough to shake the foundations of corporations and governments, hidden behind its shadows. She had wanted to send it out immediately, but Samuel had stopped her. He had simply said, the truth should only be given to those who know how to honor it. And he was right. Truth in the wrong hands could birth more blood. And she was tired of blood. That afternoon, they sat together in a small cafe overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. People hurried by, the hum of traffic blending with the distant crash of waves, a quiet symphony of the ordinary world they had once lost. What will you do when it's all over? She asked softly. Samuel took a sip of coffee, eyes fixed on the horizon. I've never thought about that. Men like me, we don't usually get a final chapter. Then let me write it, she said with a faint smile. He turned toward her eyes, meeting hers, steady searching. And how would you write it? She tilted her head teasingly, that after saving the world from darkness, a mafia boss finally learned how to grow flowers. He chuckled, a low, genuine laugh that made her heart ache with warmth. Grow flowers. I don't exactly have a green thumb. Then I'll teach you, she said. But first, she placed her hand on the table, her gaze unwavering. We have to finish this. Later that day, they arrived at the old headquarters of the Reynolds Foundation. Once a world-renowned charity, now a silent ruin blanketed in dust. The iron doors groaned as Samuel pushed them open. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and forgotten years. This was where Seraphim had been born. And here Victoria intended to end it. She set the hard drive on the wooden desk, opened her laptop, and linked it to the global network. Lines of code appeared, followed by hundreds of names, people who once ruled from behind masks of philanthropy. All it takes is one click, she said quietly. And it all comes crashing down. Samuel looked at her, his gaze no longer that of a man who once commanded an empire of crime, but of someone who had finally seen light after the storm. Are you sure? Once you do this, there's no going back. She pressed her lips together and nodded. I've lived my whole life inside the lies of my bloodline. Now I want to live for the truth. He said nothing, only watched as the afternoon light fell across her hair, soft and golden. Then he placed his hand gently on her shoulder. Do it. She clicked send. In an instant, data streamed outward, encrypted signals raying through networks across the globe. The servers flared to life, fans roaring, lights flashing. And then the screen displayed transmission complete. Seraphim dismantled. Victoria exhaled relief, mingling with a hollow ache. When darkness vanishes, those who lived within it often don't know where they belong anymore. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hall. Samuel drew his gun, pulling her close against the wall. The door burst open. A team in black stormed in. At the front stood a woman with brown hair and ice in her eyes. "Claire Morgan," Samuel said quietly, his voice flat. Claire smiled, the metal of her gun glinting in the amber light. "Hello, both of you. I came to see who wins the final hand." "You've already lost, Victoria," replied, standing tall. "The data's been sent." Claire tilted her head, slightly smirking. "I know, but there are things you can't erase with data, like the secrets of a man who kills for love." She turned the gun toward Samuel. "Tell her, Harrison. Tell her it was you who shot Daniel Reynolds that night and saved him later, just to ease your guilt." Victoria froze. "You're lying." Samuel said nothing. She looked at him, waiting, hoping, but his silence was enough. Tears welled up. "You hid this from me." His hand tightened around the gun, his eyes fractured with pain. "I never meant to lie. It was an accident. Daniel stepped into the line of fire during my standoff with Vasilyev. I couldn't pull back in time. I thought he was dead. When I found out he survived, I swore I'd protect him and you no matter what it cost." Claire laughed, sharp as broken glass. "And now you think that confession makes you noble? How tragic, a killer mistaking himself for a hero." Samuel didn't respond. He only looked at Victoria, his eyes filled with quiet despair. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he whispered. "I just need you to know I never meant to hurt him. Everything I did was for you." And then Claire fired. The bullet sliced the air. Samuel dodged, returned fire. Chaos erupted. Smoke, screams, shattered glass. "Stop!" Victoria cried. "Claire, you're insane!" Another shot rang out the window, shattered sunlight spilling through, painting streaks of blood across the floor. Moments later, Claire staggered, clutching her side. She fell, her eyes still burning with defiance. "You can kill me," she hissed, "but you'll never erase the darkness inside you." Then she was still. In the distance, sirens wailed. Samuel stood motionless, his gun slipping from his grasp. Victoria stepped closer, tears streaming. "You can't keep dying to make up for the past," she whispered. "You've suffered enough." He met her gaze, his voice raw. "No, Victoria. I've never suffered enough to forget." She cupped his face, trembling but firm. "Then suffer with me. Live with me. Don't die for me." The setting sun bathed them in warm gold as he nodded slowly, taking her hand, truly holding it for the first time. 3 months later. On a hillside cafe outside Lisbon, the morning breeze carried the scent of salt and roasted beans. A chalkboard by the door read, "Seraphim Coffee," for those who once lost their way and found the light again. Victoria stood behind the counter, her hair tied neatly, her smile calm and gentle. At a table near the terrace, Samuel sat reading, sunlight spilling across his face, the faint scar, now just a whisper of the past. A group of tourists stopped by, chatting and laughing. Victoria poured their coffee, then turned to Samuel. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. He looked up, eyes warm as dawn. "Only that I didn't believe in peace sooner." She smiled and set a cup before him. "The world has changed. And so have we." Samuel reached out, taking her hand. His voice was steady, deep. "No, Victoria. We've only just begun to live." The wind carried the scent of coffee and sea salt. Far on the horizon, the sun rose slowly, golden, forgiving. And for the first time after everything, they smiled, not because they had won, not because they had survived, but because at last they had found each other again, where the dawn had returned. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that helps future stories come alive and reach more hearts.